My name is Lynn Knight, and I am the sponsor of Interlocking Threads, Conversations with International Students. This is an independent project that builds off of 30 years of experiences and connections working with international students at Earlham College, which is located in Richmond, Indiana. Throughout my career, I employed and worked with a large percentage of international students in the Office of Events in positions of events management. During my tenure, I listened to international students share their stories of their challenges and struggles of what it meant for them to be an international studying in the United States. It became apparent to me that the general public was unaware of what it meant to be an international student and their contributions to their communities once they graduate. It has become part of my social activism in finding different platforms in which to share the contributions, specific challenges, and perspectives associated with being an international student who studied in a country other than their country of origin. This project took on its first form in 2018 when Annika Hermke and I were supported through the Great Lakes College Association to produce the International Journey, which is archived on the Oral History of Liberal Arts Association's website. While this opportunity was welcomed, I continue to believe I had only scratched the surface of sharing with a broader audience what it meant to be an international student. It was in the spring of 2020 that a chance conversation brought up the idea that a travel documentary might be the next step in sharing the international student story. And this is when the production team with Annika Hermke and Rihanna Peck was formed.
Hi everybody, my name is Annika and I'm one of the production team members. When the pandemic hit, this project's mission to connect through common shared story was more timely than ever. Shifting our travel to only the virtual, the world participated through their computers, and we did too. Interlocking Threads, Conversations with International Students aired its first conversation in June of 2020, and since then we have produced 11 episodes and held conversations with 29 guests from the 18 different countries. It has been a wonderful experience to connect with all these guests across the world during this pandemic, to feel the connections during times of isolation, as well as to reflect on this time and our past as international students. We heard such an abundance of perspectives that all added important pieces, and it felt very healing for us all to be in these conversations throughout the pandemic. Our intention as the production team is to go beyond the normalization and posting of hot take content on social media. Our aim is not to delete content that does not fit with certain narratives, but to hold a platform for voicing the complexity that makes up the fabric of the international experience that can be taken up for further reflection and conversation. We are a platform that voices the personal stories of international students to share perspectives of the student immigrant experience.
The title Interlocking Threads has found its voice as we re-listened to, transcribed, and edited our conversations with international alumni over the past year. My name is Rihanna, and I'm the third member of the production team. In this year in review, we have compiled testimonies of experience that have stood out and become reoccurring themes across this project. They are the American dream, resilience, duality of being, pressures faced, COVID-19 responses, transformation possible, and activism and confronting ignorance. We have intentionally designed this video to include different and sometimes contrasting experiences. Rather than editing out ambiguities, complexities, and contradictions, we leave them in, and we encourage people to want to ask questions and reflect on what is said. We will now let the guests speak for themselves, and we welcome discussion on our social media pages.
like I think the American dream is a very, very like it's an actual thing, and especially for people who come from developing countries, uh, irrespective of I don't know, like no matter what status you are in society, I feel like a lot of people in Nepal, they have seen America as like the dreamland, you know, like America is like the place where you will have to go to get your degree and to make your life, you know, to be successful. And so yeah, so that's like I think that I grew up with that. It's just like not everyone is fortunate clearly enough to have their American dream play out the way they want it to. And I think this was the year when I realized that my American dream could also, like, it's definitely turning into a nightmare, you know, like as cliched as it sounds. But um but I just think that it's so ingrained in us ever since we're a kid that okay, not just America, but I feel like now as we're kind of like as things are changing back home, I know that people are looking at the United Kingdom, they're looking at Australia, but you see this common pattern. They just really want to get out of Nepal and they want to get out of the Asian subcontinent basically, because there's that idea that, you know, like education is like better in the rest of the world but not your like country. And I do think that that's just I've I do think that like back home, like people need to step out of that thinking, and I feel like slowly people are, and they are choosing to stay back home because we need back people back home as well.
Yeah, sometimes I wish I wasn't, I wish we didn't have to know so much about American politics, as and I wish people maybe knew more about Bolivian politics per se, but unfortunately, that's not necessarily the case. And the reality is that with such a big country and with that has such a strong economy, therefore comes this space of like having an influence within international politics. So and I think maybe this is something that a lot of Americans don't realize of the impact of their politics with the rest of the world and all other countries, and how much that like affects so many different scenarios, treaties, and so on. So
I think in a way, I hope it's a wake-up call to a lot of folks in rural parts of the country who see urban areas as this aspirational, my dream come true, and a place of economic activity. And I hope there may be like some mind shift changes to like spur rural growth, to think about innovation within the areas that they are already in, to understand the value of like a family network and social capital, and get urban societies to feel the pinch of the value that they serve, and that they deserve to be treated better if they need to be attracted into the cities for the work that they do.
I mean, I wasn't born, I wasn't raised in Jakarta. I mean, I'm from a small town in Indonesia, and for a long time, I mean, in Indonesia we don't have a welfare system. I mean, the US is probably not a perfect example for a welfare state, but at least you guys have unemployment benefits, you got SNAP program, you got TANF, and all those benefits for those who are vulnerable. But in here, we don't have, stimulus money. We don't have that stimulus checks, and we don't have welfare system basically. But I mean, because of that, I think, I mean, for many years, I thought that, growing up here, I mean, especially in rural areas, in smaller towns, if you don't have money, your uncle will pay for your college. You know, your aunts will help you with school uniform and stuff like that. And I think that's what uh, I think about Indonesia for a long time. You know, if you don't have money for hospital, you know, your family can help you. Maybe not all the time. And maybe some families are poorer than others, and you might end up not being able to go to school. But generally speaking, your family will help you. Let's say if I lose a job now, I'll just move back home. But the thing is, people in urban areas, that's not the case. And people here, they don't have that connection. When they migrated here in Jakarta, it's a concrete jungle. You know, if you lose your job and you lose it, either you live on the street if you cannot afford the rent anymore, or if you go home, if you still have some people at home in other parts of the country. But yeah, I think it makes people think about, I don't know, there's a lot of insecurity if you live in urban areas, and there's that, and the sense of community is much stronger. I mean, there's a lot of agriculture in Indonesia, they're still in that cooperative way, you know, I don't know what's the word in English, but they're run by the community, not by, you know, person to person. And I think there's a lot of that anxiety among us in urban areas in Jakarta, and especially now, yeah, especially those who in the slum areas here who live here for a long time, that they probably don't have any family members back at wherever they're originally from, and they cannot return, and they cannot work, and yeah, and they're not being helped. There's no welfare here, so.
Yeah, there was a lot that happened throughout the course of like 4 years and continuing now that I don't think I was entirely prepared for. But I think one thing that being an international person in the US teaches you is just being resilient and constantly having to adapt yourself to changing situations. And that was something that this whole pandemic and the summer after that was something that it taught me as well, because like I had a plan for myself. I had a plan that I thought, that everything would go accordingly. But then of course the pandemic hit, and then a lot of new decisions came out by the administration, and we were forced to adapt ourselves. We were forced to constantly, think on our feet, stay on our toes. And of course that's very difficult because you don't know what to expect from a place where you've been, where you've tried to establish yourself, where you hope to stay on for a longer period of time. But at the same time, like, I think that this summer definitely built a lot of resilience. And to anyone who is listening, I think especially during this period where we're constantly facing a lot of anxiety from different, whether it's the work that you're doing, whether it's this political situation, whether it's what's going to happen afterwards, whether we're going to be able to work here or not work here. I think I would just say, be kind and understanding towards international students, because we're very far away from our families. We're very far away. We're trying to navigate this world. We're trying to navigate this space all by ourselves. And while it's definitely much easier having a good support system, having a good friend group, a friend circle also, I think it is definitely difficult. Yeah.
I think again, I feel like pretty fortunate to have had experiences living abroad before, because I feel like we have a lot of practice in kind of like building your own community quickly. And you kind of already have this like roadmap of like how to find friends who share similar interests as you. And you're a lot more like open to just, I don't know, like, I guess like talk to strangers or things like that, or just go like, I think it's funny that a lot of my friends ask me like, so what do you do when you like had just moved to a new place? And I'm like, well, at the beginning you just like go out by yourself to a lot of things, and that's how you start meeting people. But I think it's the reason I'm able to do this now is because I've gone through a lot of times where I had to like move to a new place and kind of like quickly like build relationships with people and things like that. So I feel like that has allowed me in most places and most transitions in my life to quickly kind of like find my own community and like make friends.
But as far as like emotional connection, you lose a lot. And this is a sacrifice all of us have been making for like what, 15 years now, 12, 15 years now, since we left home originally. Um, I used to envy my friends who you were able to go home every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every break. And I'm like, I can't see mine for years because money was an issue back then. Just to get a plane ticket was expensive. And now that when money is not an issue, then there is the political situation. When political situation is somewhat okay, pandemic hits. Like, can we catch a break? You lose a lot of connection. You have to build new connections every time you move. You have to build new friendships. Some friendships survive test of time, as three of us are here. Even if we don't see each other, we know we're there and we're connected. But I think that's what the international student third culture kid lifestyle prepares you for, to be very adaptable, fit, wear many hats, fit wherever you need to fit. And we become better judges of character because we have to protect ourselves, because there is nobody, parental figure or somebody who is there to protect us. And I'm pretty sure everybody here would agree that the same parental relationship, and especially like there becomes a cultural difference too. So you're suddenly coming from here and your family still has this reference point. So even to bridge that gap, no level of communication skill or family therapy can possibly bridge that gap.
I guess I can add something to like questions surrounding family, and like communities during this time. And I mean, to me, it's weird because I've lived here since obviously 2013 when I went to Earlham, but it's felt like it's been so long that I feel like I have sort of created like this network of chosen families just like within the U.S. itself, and a lot of it actually comes through Earlham. And there's just something about. I mean, I don't really want to talk about Earlham, because I know this is not paid by Earlham or anything, but it influences a lot of the things that I have right now. And one of it is community. I feel like there's something so special about this college that the sense of community was everyone, just maybe because it's so small and everyone gets involved, and so you just kind of know people. And so wherever I've been now, after Earlham, I always have like a solid community. And I feel like now I feel like I'm in the safest and like most comfortable space being in the US, because I have all these close friends that I have since college and people that I've met along the way. So yeah, that kind of helps, cure, I guess, the feeling of like homesick and homesickness. And being a PhD student too, I have this like long-term commitment now being here, right? But I'm doing something that I really want to do, and so I feel rewarded in that sense. And home will always be there. Take a break, but it's interesting because the immigration question. Um, Initially, I wanted to do PhD for the safety of remaining in the U.S. because I thought that the visa, this like F1 student visa, is very legitimate, right? I don't know if you guys share this view, but like I've always thought that like having this education visa is one of the almost like easiest things if you like going to school, to like stay in the US as an immigrant. But then over COVID, when the ICE announcement, just came out of nowhere, targeting like us, international students who hold these visas, it just doesn't make sense to me, because the reason why we pay to have these visas is to be a legal alien resident in the US. So the fact that schools are closing doesn't mean that we now become, an illegal person. Like we have gone through the process of coming here, legally. So I was really, really shocked and was very scared. And I had to like read the announcement 10 times just for me to understand if I was affected, and I wasn't because my school was hybrid. So yeah, so it's always this instability, you know. And I ask myself all the time, like, why do I want to be here? You know, it's like so many things are so imperfect, and you know, we go through all of these systemic oppression, you know, that's going on like all around us. But at the same time, like, I really do feel like my community is here, and I have expanded and grown so much as a person here in the United States through the people that I met, through my education. And it's just, you know, I just feel like I belong here. It doesn't feel like a foreign like land anymore. But you know, I'll always have this connection to home, obviously.
In terms of the question of the land, I think it's very interesting because I think it's both. Like, to me, very early when I started moving around, I had to kind of like tell myself that home was inside of me, so that home could come with me anywhere I went, and that included people and places and food and all of these things. That I had to like kind of like carry all these things that mattered to me with myself and like in my backpack, so that when I moved somewhere else, they would still be part of me. So that's, I think, a way that I still connect with land, and that I know that it's kind of still in me in some way, and in the people too.
In terms of like moving so much, I don't have a connection to the land. So like I feel like for me, I don't have this problem. I connect to, like for me, it's mostly about the people around me. So I feel like for me, it's just like about finding the right community and about finding the people rather than the land. I mean, for me personally, land is a nice bonus, but it is actually like about the people who are around you and what the shared resources and like shared social capital that you have and how you can use it.
Even with language, my family makes fun of me for not speaking Spanish well, even though it's my native tongue. It's so
Me
strange.
too. German.
Yeah, I completely like. I think sometimes we push ourselves so hard to fit in, or like to comply by the standards of the country we're currently living in terms of language, in terms of behavior, in terms of thought. Then when we come back to our own countries, we can't bring ourselves to do that naturally anymore. It's such a strange thing.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that like it's hard to manage, I think, is that when you're back, I don't know like whether you, Annika, or Maffer notice that, but like people look at you as an outsider.
Yeah.
Like, and it's kind of hard to get your perspective across, or like things that you do when people like look at them as something foreign.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I try to avoid telling people when I go home that I study here, that I work here, because they treat me differently, and I don't want that. Exactly, it makes me feel like I'm an outsider of my own space, and I really feel like an outsider most of the time. So
yeah.
I think one thing that's hard that I didn't realize was hard was I was planning on going home for 3 months this summer, and I haven't been home for more than 2 weeks every year, and it's been a year since I've been home, and now a year and a half, and I was like, and I don't even have like a driver's license or anything back home, or any sort of ID and anything, because I left at 17, and in India it happens at 18. And I've never been home long enough to like do anything, because it's just been like after a summer internship for 2 weeks in August before school starts, I just go home. And it's like, and I don't no, I was really looking forward to it because I'm living with an Indian girl right now. Like one of my flatmates is Indian, and she came like last year, and she tells me things about India that I didn't know. Like I had no idea. Like in Delhi, things are changing so fast, and I had no idea things were changing. Like because even when I go home, I don't like go out because it's just 2 weeks. So I don't get to see Delhi. I get to see my family, but I don't get to see the city or anything. So my memories from Delhi are 5 years ago. So I don't have any recollection of it. And I had no idea. This is something that's very new to me and I'm trying to like get my head around because I didn't even know I was like it's been that long.
I would say I do believe in sort of a duality of being, of existing. I have my life. I know who I am. My close friends here know the real Omar and what he believes in, what he stands for. My family doesn't. My family, like Elizabeth said, they have a reference point to what Omar is supposed to be or is, and I keep them at that reference point. And the point for that, the reason for that is really that gap. Like you can't, what I've learned to become who I am I've gone through a lot of experiences as in I lived situations that taught me lessons. My family didn't have the chance to live those situations. They didn't travel, they didn't go to Earlham, they didn't have, you know, the depression cycles I had and the therapy I had and all of the things I went through to get to the person that I am, that I'm very proud of. But to try to convince them of some things I believe in right now after all of that is just lost cause, I think. And I think I would rather keep the intimacy, the connection, the closeness, as opposed to start to, you know, to try to convince them of things they cannot comprehend and then lose the connection.
Just like everyone that spoke in this section, I, as an international student, have also experienced this duality of being and becoming foreign to our home countries, and sometimes even our friends and family back home. I guess many people will be able to relate to some of this just from the nature of growing up and experiencing life outside of our hometowns and families. And I believe for international students, this is just on a whole other level because we deal with extreme cultural differences and long physical distances. I didn't leave Germany until I was 17, and still I feel like I did a lot of my growing up abroad. I adapted and grew to live in a new cultural context, which also meant growing apart from Germany and my family back home to some extent. And yet, I am still an immigrant and a foreigner in this country, and I do not have any certainty of a future here. So I live in this in-between space, being more adaptable and resilient for it, being able to switch between German and American culture and customs, and I always carry something from the other as I have learned and grown through both cultures.
During that transition period, I think what happened was I felt like I had failed everyone by not being on top of everything, not being at a better place, not pulling through on my part of their expectations of me. And I think I have just been avoiding people partly because I just don't want to confront those expectations again. I don't want people to look weird at me because I'm not somewhere better or somewhere where they wanted me to be or somewhere where they expected me to be.
I mean, as a student, as someone on a student visa, you have like I think 90 days of, especially like if you decide to work after, you have 90 days of unemployment. So it's like you basically get 3 months to like find a job if you want to stay in the country, and then like keep that status. And then there's no option to be between jobs as well. Like especially at the time of the pandemic, like when you're thinking about job security and stuff, like there's that anxiety that comes in. Oh, what if I lose a job tomorrow? And then like my visa status isn't, you know, is in risk as well. So there's definitely a difference. And then I realized that more so after I graduated from Ireland, like the fact that you are on a visa, especially in the world outside, makes a lot of difference. Like, you know, it's just a little, I mean, it's a tougher task for you to make it out there. It's like the odds are kind of like stacked against us, I think, as international students. But yeah, you just got to make it work. I mean, there's like no other option, kind of like. But yeah, it would definitely be helpful, like if you got like a few time to like, you know, sit down, graduate from school, and then think about, okay, where I want to go. Do I want to go, you know, to a grad school, or, you know, pursue something different? So yeah, I've definitely felt it a lot more after I've graduated from Ireland, the restrictions on an international student.
Yeah, and even if you are on OPT, then whatever you do after college has to be directly related to your major. Like,
Yeah, no,
what if I don't want to do chemistry or math anymore?
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like, it's like adds extra pressure on you. Like when you think about it, like whatever choices you make in college, you're stuck with it. Like,
yeah.
now
I was stupid.
I think,
and it's just, why hold me for the rest of my life for the stupid choices I made as an undergrad?
Yeah, exactly. So like, and now how I think of it, maybe like if I wanted to do something beyond the field of chemistry, like now I've spent like two or 3 years already working towards like a position in chemistry or a pharmaceutical industry. It would not be wise for me to like choose an entirely new path because I have to start from scratch in a country where there's so many restrictions. So you're like, this is what's set for me, I guess. But yeah, that's where the difference between like domestic and international students does come into play.
Before that, I was doing a master's degree, which is actually completely different to what I'm working on now. But I guess that's something that I've learned throughout this time of like traveling and living abroad and being an international student and having that flexibility that JP was talking about, of moving around, that your plans always kind of change, and you're taking into very different and unexpected directions. So in fact, I was studying a master's in anthropology and ethnochorology and dance and folklore, which I really, really love. So my love hasn't left that part. I'm just exploring a different part and a different interest of myself at the moment. So, which is like this passion for environmental sustainability and campaigning and activism. So I think, I think I find that sometimes, and I might go into different directions, but I find that sometimes we kind of focus so much on like one particular thing, and I just think that sometimes we just have different passions and they can be explored at different times, and you don't necessarily need to be boxed in one particular space.
Things. Like when I came to the US, first of all, I didn't want to come to the US. I like when I graduated high school, I was like, there was so much pressure to go into US colleges, and I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to go home because my main goal was to go home and like to apply all of the things that I have learned while studying abroad, and like just make Mexico a better country. But then it turned out in such a way that like all the support that we had was to find schools in the US, and there was so much pressure from everyone to go to school in the US. So I was like, okay, let me do this 4 years, and then I'll go home, and then I'll apply all these things. But then as soon as I graduated, there was all this pressure again of like, okay, what's next? You need to find a job in the US. You need to stay for longer. Like you need to start thinking about a green card. You need to start thinking about citizenship. Like, what are you doing? So like, I feel like, yes, I clicked on the yes, I I achieved this thing that I was expected to do, but there is always something more. I think this has really made me question like all the messaging that has been imposed onto me specifically, but onto like really most international students or onto most people who migrate to the United States specifically, is that the U.S. is like this. Well, like obviously like the what we call the American dream, but like that the US is always better than all of our countries and that we'll get more opportunities and stuff. And like really analyzing that and really asking myself whether that's true or like really like I don't know. It's hard sometimes as an international student with everything that's happening, like knowing that a lot of people don't want us here. And so that's just hard to wrap myself around. And I just been thinking like what types of things I could do if I went home as well. And like again, exactly, I think that is the real question that we have to ask, like what is my role there? Like I'm gonna go to Mexico, but I have all of these experiences and background that like most of the people there don't have, like a college education, like a completely different context, and I have a completely I have a completely different social context than most people. So like even if I were to go back, I don't fully fit in there either.
Do I want to do this anymore? Do I want to try to go to grad school again, or like try to go to school again in the US and like think about all this paperwork and visas and restrictions and the instability of policies? Like there's just like no long-term policies, so you never know what's going to happen. And then my priority is my like research. Like I want to do research, and there's my priority in life to be surrounded by my loved ones. So I feel like I've established a community in the US, and leaving it will be really hard. So when I first started thinking about probably maybe leaving the US for grad school abroad, that's what I was thinking about. But I was opening up to the idea because I started feeling like it's kind of helpless on the long run to invest more and more, like pay for grad school applications and invest more and more and like more time and effort, and then having to, you know, that stripped away from you for because of the policy rather than because of your own like work.
Think I didn't realize how far I was from them until this happened, because usually I always think, oh, I can just go visit, or even though obviously it is really far. But now with going to visit, it's you don't know if you're actually going to make it there, because there are so many places that might not let you in, or might you might need to quarantine, or all of these other things. So that was another thing that got added to the problem. And yeah, I think for me too, I didn't talk to my parents every day before the pandemic. Now I basically call them every day, even if it's for a little bit. And so in that way, it kind of made a difference. Again, it made me understand the important things in life.
I like forget that I'm an international student because I've been here for so long. So I forget all the extra things that we have to deal with on daily basis. So to just like have a reminder and just, you know, talk about it actually is really nice, because sometimes when you're here just for so long, you don't really think that you're dealing with anything different than the person next to you, but you are, because at the end of the day, your family's there. That's not your country. There's a lot of adjustments. So to just remember who we are and how I came to college and all of that is really nice. I think we can never do like we cannot reflect enough is what I'm trying to say. Reflecting on our identity and why we came and how we came and who we are today is just something that we don't do as much as we should. But a project like this helps us do that. So I really appreciate it.
I mean, with how this whole pandemic has played out, it's been unexpected in so many ways. One of the big ways is the US being the US that prides itself on usually being the best and the leader in everything. You would think that they should have the pandemic under control, but no, it's been worse over here. And so I would have my sisters texting me, hey, are you wearing a mask? Hey, you should get eye protection. And I'm thinking, well, thank you. I appreciate the concern, even though normally it would be me telling them, oh, here's the latest thing that happened, just so you know. But now they're the ones educating me on ways to stay healthy.
People back home really trust in doctors and scientists.
Okay.
So when COVID started like spreading around the globe, people really immediately took it really very seriously and did all the precautions. That being said, I feel like also with the US being such a research producing country, so like the US is the #1 publishing country in science. Having that controversial like approach to COVID, like having it politically affected, did affect how people acted even back home. Because you have this like major like you have this major country when it comes to research saying that it actually isn't that serious. So I feel like healthcare is definitely not politicized where I come from, and we don't have an anti-vaxxer like movement. We don't have any movements that like target research and scientists, but we do look for foreign like behaviors.
I know that my country isn't perfect by all the rankings, all the parameters, all the economical statistical data. We are really in a bad position, but I always believe there is hope. I came back to kind of build that hope and to kind of be, part of the people that are kind of doing some changes. And I honestly thought that, me here and that individual there and that individual there and that individual there will kind of collect into kind of, a snowball that will create something, and that will kind of, say to our government, hey, you need to kind of do things the normal way or be like responsible for your governance. And the COVID situation has shown that they really do not care. And it's hard to live with that notion. It's hard to live with the notion of being, patriot, one that loves the country, one that has purposely decided to stay in my country, and then just being, government doesn't care. So
And I think something else that we are also fortunate to have is in our various countries, there's a lot more collectivist ideologies in the way we go about our lives. And so as people are being encouraged to wear masks, you know that you're doing it not just for yourself, but also the person next to you who might be an older person whose immune system might not be as strong as young people. And so that's something that I've appreciated, knowing what beliefs our communities hold onto, as opposed to some places in the US where there's a push for, oh, it's my personal rights and I choose what I do, whether or not to wear a mask. And it's like, yes, I get it, but it's not just about you, it's about the person next to you as well.
Mm.
Most of my family is in Palestine, in the occupied territories of Palestine referred to. Palestinian people in the past, I do want to mention this real quick, have had scenarios where they weren't allowed to leave their home. I remember growing up for 2 months straight, we weren't allowed to leave our house. We would only be allowed certain times to go get food from a local store. Outside, there would be tanks, there would be jeeps, it was just a military zone, basically. And it was normalized, unfortunately. As a Palestinian growing up, it was one of those things like, what's going on? Remain strong, don't worry. We just need to adapt real quick to the change that's taking place. So the Palestinian community, as soon as COVID hit, boom, everybody was like, let's go to the stores. We bought everything we need, refrigerated everything, and they're like, we kind of dealt with this before in a different way. So we'll stay at home, no problem whatsoever. It's not their first choice, but at the end of the day, they'll gather with the family, they'll enjoy each other's company, and everything is fine.
Given we've seen the pandemic and this crisis disproportionately affect the poor more, and there's a bit of a dichotomy there in terms of, yes, it doesn't discriminate in terms, the virus doesn't discriminate in that everybody's susceptible to it, but the preconditions to, or the environments within which you operate and the potential risk of contracting it disproportionately affects those in marginalized communities.
Some other things I've noticed is that a lot of people that can afford like spending time outside the city in like Massachusetts, maybe New Hampshire or Vermont, they did leave for a while. So you saw like a lot of people leaving for a good amount of time, for like 2 months. And the other thing that I've noticed is that there is a lot less interaction between like people from different privilege like backgrounds. So like people that could afford never go on public transport are doing it, and you just like see a lot more division. Like if you do go on public transport, you will see a lot of people that are going to work that are essential workers, and there's just like it's just a very weird like dynamics in the city. There's definitely a lot more, I feel like, division when it comes to class, because when people are like they have more access to resources, they are utilizing that to be safe from COVID. Meanwhile, a lot of people are not capable of doing that. So that's also something I've noticed in public transport.
I do see to a certain extent like business as usual in terms of some of these issues. Where I do see I have a bit more optimism is understanding the value of the contribution of these individuals in the economy. So I think when I spoke about migrant workers having to really sort of struggle to get home during these times, I think what's become very clear is that they've come into the spotlight in terms of just the number of them, the difficulties with which they move seasonally to urban centers, to their contribution in terms of building the infrastructure, the homes, the offices, the hospitals, the schools, many facets of public life that the privileged lot get to spend their time in is created by the hands of all these migrant laborers. And there is a recognition for the services that I mean, blue collar workers or other sort of groups of people provide. So I do think that you'll see less of people taking them for granted, even if temporarily. You'll see more respect for these occupations. There will be more value for their services, and a recognition across society for the role they play in making our lives more comfortable. So that I am more optimistic about, but is this drastically going to change? in terms of the next pandemic and whether the marginalized communities will still be worse hit. Yeah, I think they probably will. But will the government be better prepared to think about lockdowns or other rules and how that will disproportionately affect these groups and what they need to do early? Yes. Will it push civil society to come up with solutions for some of these issues? Yes. But yeah, I think inequality is going to rise, and the marginalized will continue to be badly affected. But there are some sort of slivers of hope in some of the other intangible areas.
I have a little counter to that, though. I agree that there is a bit of an awareness, and perhaps the governments can address the issue better in the event or when this happens again, whenever that might be. But I think at the same time, I think at this point, we're now 4 or 5 months into this, and if the media is to be believed, if you're watching various media reports and people sort of returning to their lives or wanting to return to their lives or selfishly trying to push their way back into the way things were or whatever it might have been, seems to me that as much as communities around the world want to recognize those who were sort of in the underclass, let's say, I don't know if they're going to remember them or recognize them beyond this whenever we get back to whatever sense of normalcy lies ahead. I'm not so sure the global community who's a little bit more privileged will remember or recognize or acknowledge the struggles that the lower classes have. I think because we are so used to the idea of inequality and then the way that things are the way they are, with a certain level of society being able to be a lot more comfortable, and then you've got significant sections of society that will never be able to sort of be economically well off. And it'll just go back to that. There might be some recognition now, but I don't know how sustainable that might be. And maybe that's a pessimistic view, but from what I've been seeing so far, it just seems like everybody's in such a desperate need to get back to the way things were that they're not going to think about anything that they've learned. So all of this pomp and circumstance of clapping for medical workers or feeding people who may not have their jobs anymore, may not be able to put food on the table, all of that, makes people feel good in the short term, but I don't know, like down the road, if it's going to continue into some sort of recognition beyond what we've seen.
Not only is the world crying out because of this, but also being a Palestinian right now is a really, I don't know what the word is for it, but it's not fun as we are facing our annexation ourselves, right? And it's kind of like as the world outcries over here for Black lives, right? The oppressed community in the United States is having hopefully what we in Arabic in the past have called the uprisings in Palestine called the intifadas, right? Our revolutions. We kind of feels like a revolution. Who knows, right? I think it's like two sides. I'm like, well, is this the same? Is it not the same that I've seen before? And it's interesting because there was a Palestinian Lives Matter kind of situation going on over there, in the way that we as Palestinians identify with the Black Lives Matter movement, for those of us who have decided to educate ourselves and really want to understand that it's all one struggle. And even if this revolution continues in this country, we're not going to see the fruits of it at least for another 10 years, at least, right? We have no, even we can't get a decent person to run for office that's going to help move this along. So what we do is, right, this is what I've been preaching, and I think a lot of the people on the ground in America that are like-minded preaching is affect your community first, right? And that's what Pags taught me. Gypsy taught me that, right? Like, you can't make peace and you can't have true liberation until your community is liberated, right? So I think I've been focusing on my community, right? The Black and brown kids that I work with, the Black and brown people I interact with, my family, right, who have some racist ideals. I'm trying to whisper because I'm like coming here and like yelled at for saying that, but like, you know, affect your community first, because believe me, it will affect you. It will affect you. Like, so it's about bringing the narrative to the personal, and so it's like on us, not only in America, all over the world. If Black people are free, we will see the world will slowly, very slowly, become free. Because being Black is the first, is like the lowest end of the totem pole, because you can see it. So I think that's the way that this country has been, like, right? Those that are like-minded like me, that's the way we're approaching it, is like, do what you can. If you're in COVID and you don't feel comfortable going in the streets, a social media post isn't enough, right? Sign your petitions. Even if you're not in the States, do what you can, right? Read, educate yourself, figure out why it exists the way it exists, and how do we undo it? And what you, even if you don't think you're a racist, you are. All of us in this room are. What have you done to perpetuate that cycle? And how do you undo it? And it's on us as people who have had the opportunity to live in a world, even if we don't right now, in a world where love and acceptance exists, even if it was only for 4 years of our life. It's on us to perpetuate that cycle wherever we're at.
Say we're constantly wondering, like, if all of the things that I'm doing, helping kids get into the colleges, get into the universities, teaching kids for free, giving free tutor sessions, is it worth is it worth it, honestly? Is it going to change anything? My work, yes, because kids do go, kids get amazing education. Sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't. But in any way, shape or form, they improve their lives, and they improve life of their families, which for me, I guess that's the pinnacle. I mean, coming from my own perspective, that's why I chose to come to Ireland, to improve my life and to improve my family's life, down the road, and eventually somehow contribute to my country in any shape or form that I can, and help my country. Maybe not through political means, but doing what I can at a local level that might improve my city, that might improve situation for youth.
For me, it was not just like at that moment. I had also I had been planning on helping orphanages back home. My initial plan definitely was to start one from my own, with whatever I'm gonna save with my earnings in this entire period of time, whenever I'm going to hopefully medical school. But the plan kind of like now is, I don't know, with all this pandemic situation. So what I thought was like, maybe I can start from somewhere else, So I had been like in contact, as well as I was doing my own research, and quite a few of them kind of like stood out to me. And that's why, and during the same time when they needed help, and I think I had financial situation like at the right time with me. And just like you said, this is the time when we reflect on a lot of other things. For me, it was more of about giving people a peace of mind during the time when they really need it. or like giving any kind of like facility. It could be education or food during the time when they really need it. Or like be standing with my principal course and values that I really vouch for now as well as for the future. And that made me realize that maybe I should just help at this time and or do whatever I can.
No, personally, I think that this situation highlighted how a lot of things are interconnected and interlinked in a lot of ways. Because as you said, like for like the communities of color get more cases of COVID, which is like related to the places where they live, which is like the segregation and all this stuff, and it kind of shows how it's all connected and also connected to the climate change and how all those problems actually kind of, it's not that we need to find one solution and like we actually need to look for solutions that encompass all those different angles and kind of do different things at the same time. And that's what I was actually thinking recently more with the protests going on in the US, in the sense that there's definitely in every country many communities that experience similar things that communities of color in the US do. And I was thinking like that it would be really nice if there was more international communication for like finding solutions for these problems. Because I feel like every country, when it comes to like solving those things, it's kind of, it's all kind of separated and it's all kind of within this country, within this community. While I feel like kind of communicating, sharing ideas, sharing like different methods of addressing and finding solutions would be like very helpful and actually would advance us forward faster. I know, for example, how for the protests in the US, people use different like tactics that people in Hong Kong used like last year and this year. So like it's kind of already happening, but I feel like there could be more of that, and it would definitely like advance or like increase the pace of finding like of addressing those different issues.
For more than just the academic aspect of like studying abroad, I think as an international student, what you experience just by living outside is what actually like gives you a lot more like tools to like navigate the world how it is right now, right? So I do think it's super important, and yeah, and I guess it's just kind of like I think it's great that students are still able to like experience things like this, and because these are going to be the people in like important positions tomorrow. So it's important that they're exposed to like other cultures, and that you see that, you know, people all over the world have like similar interests and similar dreams and similar like challenges. And so yeah, we're all in the same boat. So it's just like letting them showing that to students, I guess, which is something that I personally have experienced, and I think it's been super impactful for my life. Mm-hmm.
Everything that is going on with the Black Lives Matter movement and with all of the police brutality that was happening and is still happening in the US, you as an international take a step back and think, what's my role on this? And I think especially for somebody like me, who I may be an immigrant, but I am a white Latino. So I have a lot of these white passing privileges that I have experienced ever since I was in Indiana. And if we can go a little bit back on the memory line, my very close friend when I was an undergrad was Marcos from Brazil, who was distinctively a brown person compared to me. And our both of our experiences when we would go to a restaurant, when we would go to Walmart, were very different. People did not treat us the same way. People would ask me where I was from because my accent was cute. My accent was never threatening to anybody in Indiana. And as opposed to him, that they would question him in a way that was not as friendly. And you start to realize, okay, this is a real thing. This is, and even here in New York, one of my best friends is from India, and he has been referred as curry boy and many other very derogatory terms that I have never encountered that. Because if I stay shut, if I don't open my mouth, I just look like any other American. And I think people like me who have experience in a way immigration and all of the suffering that comes with that, but also share a little bit of privilege, we need to speak up. And we definitely need to take a stand, and a very strong stand.
I started my activism while being a student in the US, having an F1 and not giving a fuck. And I was like, I don't care. Sorry for my French, but I was like, it was just literally how I felt. I went out and I did activism in the most blasphemous ways possible, got lots of serious Taliban death threats against me from back home. That's why I couldn't go home to see my family, because I would be arrested or killed right at the airport. Like, I wouldn't make it out of the airport as well, Homer. It's not gonna happen. But every time I talked about, you know, my experiences and then experiences in the US, and good and bad in both the places, I found that my voice carried a lot of weight as an immigrant woman who is willing to speak out. So I think a lot of the times our own fears hold us back, because the world has changed a lot, and more people will be out there to support you than you think. If you are, like, I understand the fear of not wanting to be arrested, because that one record, no matter what the reason, and you're done, your application is done. Have you ever been arrested? That's all they ask. No whys, ifs or buts. That's all they ask. And if you have a yes for an answer, you're done for. So I found that when you find the courage to speak, people listen to you. Storytelling is the only way they will listen to you. You can't throw stats and just be like, COVID-19 has killed 120,000 Americans. But when you put into context who that person was, you know, like, well, World Trade Center, only 3,000 people died in that, but the entire world suffered for it. And this significantly more people, and this is a silent killer. You can't make a wall and stop this thing, right? You can't do that. So I think it's storytelling, it's being confident in your voice that what you are saying is the right thing. And people will listen in the US, people will listen in Canada. And no matter how bad things can get in the US, the First Amendment is amazing. It's a gift only the United States has in the developed country. The Constitution is beautiful, other than the Second Amendment. It's amazing. So it does provide you legal protections. And as asylum seekers, I think asylum seekers should speak up more. It makes the stories more real. It makes your case be like, you know, just because today I don't have a death threat against me doesn't mean when I get there, I won't have it. So I personally think that, in my opinion, our voices carry a lot of weight. When we speak confidently and when we're not scared, the only way they feel they have the power is if we feel they have the power. So my personality is like that. I don't give anybody power. So that would be my suggestion, that just go out and speak your mind. Easier said than done, I know it's easier said than done. I would not go out and speak my mind in the middle of, market in Pakistan. That's not going to happen. I'm not going to live to finish my sentence. But this North American society, European society, we have the privilege. So it's up to us to speak for the people back there who can't. So that's how I look at it. So yeah, it carries weight.
I came back, and pretty much as soon as I came back, we went straight into the Brexit campaign, and seeing how divisive that kind of really was here in the UK, and seeing that right off the back of the Trump campaign, being in America and being able to live through a lot of that really helped me prepare, and I almost foresee what was going to happen, I suppose, and seeing that kind of momentum building on that side of the chain. But yeah, I'd echo the fact that I wasn't really prepared to deal with, I guess, the counter arguments, or the arguments which don't really have any grounding in anything, right? It's just like a lot of it's just made up, whatever it is. But being able to talk to people who believe strongly in these beliefs that are just aren't true, let's say, was something that I began to understand a lot better as a result of it.
Background. I think a lot of people in my age tend to be liberal in general. So what I mean by this, they would never be homophobic, or even if they are, they would be afraid to present this idea. This is just an example. So I think everyone tends to be liberal, but I think YouTube as a platform in general tends to skew more right-wing, and there's a lot of echo chambers that exist there. That people listen to certain podcasts and certain ideas, and these podcasts spread misinformation, and then they start repeating these ideas without actually double checking what they're hearing. So this is a way that people my age have been going from their naturally liberal leaning tendencies to more conservative talking points that are dangerous, because you start with, well, a lot of immigrants are violent. They start with this. Then they go to, we should ban all immigration. Then they go to, immigrants that are here should be thrown away and treated violently because they broke the law. Then it moves to more dangerous forms. And I think a lot of people are unaware of how, you're not born this evil being that you have right-wing thoughts and that's it, and you move on. It's gradual. So what I've been trying to do whenever I move to a new place is, as soon as I hear something, I would try to ask this person more questions, because I noticed that they're just speaking without thinking about what they're saying. They have certain feelings about, for example, migrants moving to Germany, and they believe that Islam is taking over Europe and the United States, and that there's a global conspiracy, for example. But they've never actually talked to a Muslim before. And you notice that a lot of these thoughts exist in echo chambers and bubbles. And I think that my simple just questioning, I'm like, can you just tell me a little bit about what you mean? And as soon as they start telling me more, I notice that they don't know anything, and that they're repeating a line that they heard on Joe Rogan podcast. So I think sometimes the more I question people, they see the contradictions in the beliefs that they have, and then I can push them to read a book. I mean, that's the maximum that I can do, because I can't explain history to them. I'm not a history teacher. And if so, you shouldn't take someone's word at face value. I feel like you should try to verify information and read from good sources, not conservativewing.com shouldn't be your source, or liberalwing.com. Just verify your information before you open your mouth. I feel like this is my approach to people, but I go at it in a very polite way, just to remind them that I am not what they think I am.
As you have heard, international students are activists. And for me, working with these international students over the years, I've witnessed the general lack of understanding associated with what it means to be an international student. With all the negativity associated with immigrants and immigration, international students suffer from the negative stigma associated with being an immigrant coming to the United States. This means that who they are and what they have to contribute is marginalized and even disregarded. As you have heard, these young people are involved and active participants in social justice issues. I ask myself, how can I, who have worked with these international students for so many years, not do something to help educate those I come into contact with by providing a better understanding of the international student? That was easier while I was working full time, but since retirement, I was at a loss of what I could do. I felt I had not done enough, that there was more left for me to do to share who these young people were and their value to each of the communities they settle. Sponsoring and producing this project provides a platform to humanize the international student. And it is when we can connect to a face and a story that we begin to better understand and hopefully find ways to relate to their experiences and can find the value of these young people who have come to the United States for their education. We've reached the end of our 2020 review and would like to take this opportunity to share some short reflections from our team and let you know about our future plans.
Thank you, Lynn. Recording this podcast in the year of 2020 amidst the COVID-19 pandemic has been unique. People had time to sit and reflect on what was going on around them. And I have been particularly struck by each of our conversations and our guests by how eloquent they are in conveying their perspective. They have taken the time to sift through their experience and think through to create their perspective and opinion. And for that, they have given us consideration for our times. With that being said, I would like to thank each one of our guests for their candid and honest conversation. You have given me connection in a time of isolation, and my hope is that for people who listen to our podcast and watch this reflection video, that they find the connection that they can apply to their lives as well. Thank you.
This has been such a valuable experience for me, and I so appreciate being a part of all these different conversations. Often now, when I face different issues in my life, I think back to something one of our guests said about similar experiences. And these conversations accompany me throughout my life, and I hope others can take similar comfort out of this project.
We are grateful to all of our guests and listeners for joining us in this journey this past year. We are now moving on from producing regular episodes to a new phase in this project. We continue to be dedicated to international students, and we will now work on sharing these international journeys. We'll keep you informed on future content or activities and how you can participate. If you have any suggestions or thoughts on subject matter that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thank you again for your support and interest of Interlocking Threads, Conversations with International Students.